Well, a few years ago, my wife and I, we had a favorite show, and I think I've shared this with you before, but it's the show Chopped. Are you guys familiar with Chopped? It's on the Food Network. Even if you don't know it, it's pretty easy to kind of figure out what it is. It's a food competition, and you've got several contestants, and they're all trying to compete, trying to make something. And it's challenging because there's special ingredients, and they're hard ingredients. But really, it really comes down to like the clock. How well are they managing the clock? And if you've ever watched or ever liked shows like this, you know as you're rooting for some of these contestants, what are you thinking as the time ticks by? You're thinking, you need to move faster, man. You can't walk to the pantry. You better run to the pantry. Like that last minute, you're thinking to yourself, are you still chopping vegetables? Like you have got to hustle. The last 10 seconds, it's huge, right? The last 10 seconds, you're just screaming at the screen, just put something on the plate. You guys clearly know Chopped. So whether or not you have watched the show Chopped or not, I think we've all had those moments, those high pressure moments where, the clock is just ticking and you're wondering, am I using the time wisely? Am I going to get this done? You might experience this actually even tomorrow. You go to work and you've got maybe 4 or 5 things that you have to get done, but you've got all day. You've got the entire day, right? And so maybe the first couple hours you're not too worried, but now 3 hours in, you're still on project number 1 and the clock is still ticking. You're like, I don't know. An hour before you have to be at your kid's game, you're thinking to yourself, I'm not going to be able to get it all done. Am I going to, it's high pressure stuff. Maybe you experienced this yesterday. You were doing a weekend project that was only going to take a couple hours, and then you could just spend the rest of the day resting. And like 6 hours in, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to get any rest in because I still am like halfway through this project. We've all had those moments where, the clock is ticking and we're wondering, are we going to be able to accomplish this thing on time? Parents, you have certainly experienced this. For those of you who have had your kids and they've now moved out of the house, you've all had these feelings. Some of you are like, I don't know what you're talking about because I'm still in the middle of sleepless nights and changing dirty diapers, and I just cannot imagine a world without the screaming kids. But it happens. Like you blink and they're 10 years old and they're relatively diaper trained, right? You blink again and you're teaching them how to drive. Maybe not on the streets. Maybe you head to the church parking lot and you allow them to figure out, the driving here. And yet the clock is still ticking. And you're like, I'm going to have to turn them over the keys to the car at some point. Are they going to be ready for this? And then you blink again and they're 18. And now the time is up, right? This is where the contestants have to lift their hands up. No more working on the project. Have you done all that you need to do in order to actually let your kids have a victory? Are they going to be successful? And we ask ourselves as parents, have we taught them everything that they need to know? Have we taught them everything that they need? And the answer is absolutely not. You have absolutely forgotten something along the way. In fact, you have probably taught them things that you wish you hadn't have taught them, but now they know, and now they're doing things that you wish they hadn't, learned that habit from you. And on that note, happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all of you, right? Now, on that note, let's review. We're in this series called Centered. And really the heart behind this series is looking at some of the qualities that Jesus says, if you implement these into your life, the way I've modeled them in my life, you're going to experience blessing. And so we've looked at some of these Beatitudes. If you look at the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, there's these qualities, there's characteristics that Jesus says, if you live these out, and we haven't looked at all of them, but we've looked at enough and applied them to our home. We said, hey, if you apply these to your life and you apply them to your home will be blessed. You'll experience a blessing because all of us, we want homes that are blessed. Whether you're single, whether you are, at home with 1,000 kids, whether you have had kids and they've moved on, we all want the same thing. We want a blessed home. And so last week, if you were with us, we looked at the very last of these Beatitudes. You guys remember what it was? Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. And you might be thinking, well, what are we going to do now? That was like the last one. So here's the thing. Knowing that we were going to do this series from the week after Mother's Day to Father's Day, I didn't want to end with persecution. I didn't want to Father's Day, because I just had in my head, there was probably going to be a few dads there who are going to feel like they're experiencing persecution because they're at church rather than on the golf course on Father's Day. So I was like, I can't end with persecution. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at one of these character qualities that actually shows up pretty early. And so if you don't mind, go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to look at verse 5 that explains one of these attitudes that comes with a blessing. Jesus says this. He says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek. We're going to talk about the blessing in just a moment, but let's focus in on this word meek. First of all, this word meek, I think, carries with it some imagery that is not always so positive. When you think of the idea of being meek, most of us are like, I don't know if I necessarily want to live that out. To prove my point, I decided to do a Google search of images that come up, just, the popular images for the word meek, just to give an idea of like, this is not something that we really enjoy. And so I did a Google search, and this is what came up. Yeah, I didn't know. There's a guy by the name of Meek Mill. He's a rapper here in the United States who I guess is really, really popular. And he's like the only thing that came up. And I was like, okay, that doesn't really work for an illustration. But I do want to emphasize, I don't know his character. Maybe he's a great guy. But I'm pretty sure that he's not. Okay, someone's laughing. They're like, no, probably not. So Jesus is not saying, blessed are those who live like Meek Mill. That's not what Jesus is saying. What I do want to do is give you a definition, and we're going to expand on this definition of meekness as we go through the day. But the idea, when you think of Christ-like meekness, what you're really looking at, and we're going to look at some scripture that kind of supports this, you're looking at someone who has power, maybe authority. This is a person who is right and has a right to whatever they want, but what they do is they actually refrain in order for others to be lifted up. They actually refrain in order for others to maybe get what they want and what they need. Which, again, if you're just kind of using that as a definition of meekness, most of us are like, I could pass on that one. Like if I've got the right and I've got the power and I've got the authority to kind of get what I want, don't I want to leverage that to get what I want? I mean, this is the dad who says, well, there's one slice of pizza and I know everybody wants it. But here's the thing, I'm dad. So, yoink, like it's mine. Like, isn't that what we like? I mean, we finally get the position of authority. We don't want to just surrender that away. But think about what draws us to Jesus. Think about what draws us to the heart of Christ. It's actually meekness. If you wouldn't mind turning to Philippians chapter 2, there's a wonderful picture of Christ's meekness. And it's found in chapter 2, verse 6 of Philippians chapter 2. This is what we read. Who, being in very nature God, the who is Jesus. So Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. So he had the position, he had the authority, he had the power. He's like, I'm not going to use that to my advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. So he uses his position, not for himself, he uses his position of power and rightness actually for us. Wilbur Wright was once asked by a reporter why he and his brother test flight the machines, their flying machines. It's like, hey, why are you actually flying your own planes? It's so dangerous. And Wilbur explained that there are a couple of ways that you can learn how to ride a bucking bronco. He said one of the ways that you can learn is sitting on the fence and observing someone else ride that bucking bronco, and you can take notes, and you can write all these things down and jot them all down, and then when you have a general idea of how you can maybe manage riding a bucking bronco, you sit on a comfortable chair and you think about it and you meditate on it, and you kind of get an idea of, that's probably what I would do. Or you can just hop on the bucking bronco, hold on for dear life, and figure it out as you go. And he says, me and my brother, we do that. In fact, this is actually what he says. He says, it is very much the same in learning to ride a flying machine. If you are looking for perfect safety, you will do well to sit on a fence and watch the birds. But if you really wish to learn, you must mount a machine and become acquainted with its tricks by actual trial. Every single Sunday, we've been sharing with you some of the qualities that will lead to blessing in your home. And you can come and you can sit and you can take notes, and you can go home and you can say to yourself, you know what? Yeah, we're a good Christian family. But we all have talked about, over and over again in the series, we've talked about the difference between being a Christian family and a Christ-centered home. Right? The Christian family is I'm gonna sit on the sidelines, observe, and say, yeah, I've got the information, I've got the head knowledge, but are you actually really living it out? Is Christ really the center of your life? See, what we're challenging dads and moms and kids to do today is we're going to go ahead and give you the machine. Right? We're going to be talking about meekness. And we're going to say, you want to hop on? You want to hop on and try this thing out? And guess what? You might get bucked off a little bit. You might actually get bruised. You might get a little bent out of shape. But here's the thing. You will actually begin to soar. What's the payoff? You will actually begin to soar because you will actually be partnering in what Christ has done for all of us. So with the rest of our time, what I want to do is I want to look at 3 adjectives that give us a bigger and broader perspective of this word meek, which oftentimes just comes with negative imagery. When you hear meek, we oftentimes think weak, right? And that's actually one of the adjectives. If you just look up a thesaurus, and there it is. Weak means meek. Meek means weak. But there's a lot of positive things too. And I don't think weakness is the best picture of meekness. Rather, there's these words that describe it in so much better detail. And I think one of those is actually the word patient. So if you think about meekness, it actually has this a connotation of you're really patient. So what are you patiently doing? Again, you have that position of power, right? You have that position of authority. But what are you doing with that? What you're doing is you're patiently giving your strength rather than reminding that person of their weakness. So if you're living out this meekness, what you're doing is you may have a position of strength, but with that strength, you're just loaning it to those around you rather than reminding them of all their weaknesses. Isn't it true that when you let people down and you fail, you know it? You're at work and you you overpromise and underdeliver. You know it. Like all you have to get is like a look and you're like, oh, I've totally let them down. Or maybe you're playing sports and you drop the pass, you miss the three-pointer, you lose the game, you swing and strike out. Like you failed in that moment, right? Maybe you cook a meal and you take one bite and you're like, over-seasoned or under-seasoned, overcooked, undercooked. Like it. As soon as you take that bite, like this is a fail. This is a fail. When you take too long to get ready in the morning, you're going to be late for that appointment. You're going to be late for that meeting. You're going to probably let some people down. Like it, right? So let's just think through this. So if meekness is patiently loaning someone your strength rather than reminding them of their weakness, dads, here's the deal. You do not need to tell your kids where they have failed. They already know it. Spouses, your husband, your wife, they already know where they've let you down. You don't need to remind them of it. Kids, your parents are painfully aware of where they failed you and where they failed other people. They do not need you to remind them. Instead, what do we need to do in the home? What we need to do in the home is we need to loan our strength rather than reminding our spouse and our kids and our parents of all their failures and all their weaknesses. You guys realize that you have tremendous strength, you have tremendous power? Don't believe me? Well, watch this video.
Can you tell me your name, your full name?
Taylor Halasora.
And who's that?
My daddy.
What's his name?
Daddy.
What's something that Dad really loves to do?
Do Instagram. Read us stories and sing a song.
What is it?
Beer.
Beer's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
What makes Daddy special?
When I get stuck on my homework, he helps me. He does good voices. When I'm sad, he cheers me up. And he gives me a lot of kisses and huggies.
Growing up and getting ready to become a dad, you're told all these things.
You learn things about yourself. Patience, responsibility, and love.
So cliche, but it's so true. Everything's about your children now.
I never thought you could love someone that much, so it keeps surprising me every day.
This is how you laugh. No, Dad.
Who's your favorite superhero?
My dad. You look like a superhero. A rainbow superhero.
I look like a rainbow superhero?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Actually, you know what's my favorite thing?
No.
You.
Oh,
Ready? Ready to do the mad dad face together? 1. Let's look over there. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
All right, so let me ask you, dads, did that touch you just a little bit? Moms, did that touch you? Ladies, did that touch you just a little bit? Students, did that touch you just a little bit? Why? Why? Because our words have power, our words have strength. And each one of those words that were spoken in kindness, whether it was from the adult to the child or the child to the parent, like it meant something. Like there was power, there was strength in there. I mean, think about the father who heard his son say, "You're my favorite superhero." Like, did you see the reaction? The reaction was, like he was speechless. Why? Because you know it melted his heart. Why? Because that dad, just like you and just like me, has days where he wakes up and he wonders if he's enough. And he wonders if he's got what it takes. And when we have people in our life, particularly in our home, who are loaning their strength to us, "You're my superhero." Yeah, I know. You might mess up from time to time, but I'm not going to remind you of your failures. Instead, I'm going to support you in your strengths. What are we doing? We're loaning our strength to them. We're lifting them up. And I think it's interesting because Scripture tells us, particularly in Proverbs, that your words have power. They have the power of life and they have the power of death. And so what are the implications for us if we're going to have Christ-centered homes? The implication is the world around us. What does the world do on a consistent daily basis? The world reminds you every single day that you're a failure. In some area, you do not measure up to other people. That's what the world does. And so as a Christ-centered home, what do? We let the world do what the world's going to do. But in our homes, what we're going to do is we're going to loan our strength instead of reminding our fellow child or our siblings as well as our parents of their weaknesses. And I know that some of you may push back and say, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you don't have the difficult conversation? Does that mean you just kind of act like, well, they're wrong, wasn't a big deal, and there's no consequences? No, of course not. But what you're consistently doing, even in the difficult conversation, and even in the discipline, what you're doing is you're siding with them rather than siding against them. What are we doing? We're siding with them, not against them. This is what Jesus did for you. I mean, think about that. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. Some of you, many of you know this. You might even have it memorized. What does it say? It says, while you were still a sinner, Christ looked at you and said, ew, gross. Oh, I can't believe it. You're a sinner? You're disgusting to me. Oh, I can't even look at you in the face right now. Is that what Jesus did? Nope. While you were still a sinner, Christ sided with you. While you were still a sinner, Christ what? Died for you. Did he just remind you of your weakness and your failing? No, he sided with you. So the question that I think we need to ask ourselves is, all right, if we're going to live out this Christ-like meekness, are we going to have our default, siding with or against? Think about it in your own life. When your family members, or even maybe friends, coworkers, when they have a weakness or they have a failing, what is your default reaction? Is it to side with them or to move against them? See, when we're modeling what Christ meekness looks like, is we're always siding with them. We're not moving against. All right, there's another adjective that I want to look at, and that's the word yield. Again, it's an adjective that describes this greater picture of what meekness looks like, and it's to yield. The idea here when it comes to yielding is that you may have the right to have the spotlight on you, but you yield the spotlight so that other people can shine. What are you doing? You're yielding so that other people can shine. Here's the problem, though. The problem is this is going to be really difficult for you if you don't feel good about yourself. If you don't feel good about yourself, it's really hard to allow other people to feel good about themselves. And to yield that spotlight, it's very, very difficult. And so where does the strength come from in order to feel good about ourselves? Well, again, it comes from being Christ-centered, reminding ourselves who we are in Christ. We are loved. We are forgiven. And the problem is if we don't get to that point, well, it's going to affect even our parenting. It's going to affect our home. Dads, you may even struggle with allowing your kids to actually be the star. You may have a hard time celebrating your kids, which I think probably just sounds really, really crazy. But let me ask you this. When your son or your daughter has a moment of achievement and they do something really, really well, do you have to tell them how they can do it a little bit better? Do you ever have those moments where, yeah, that was really good, but next time, don't forget this. Oh yeah, that was fantastic, but you know what? Make sure that you do this a little differently next time. Like if you immediately, after a moment of victory, you immediately go into coaching mode, you know what? That actually tells a little bit more about you than it does about your child. Coaching's fine. There's a place for that. But there's also a place to yield and just celebrate the win. This makes me think of something that happened a year ago. Maybe you saw this in the news, but an individual by the name of Dwayne Hanson, he wanted to celebrate his 60th birthday by breaking a Guinness Book World Record. What was his Guinness Book World Record? Well, he wanted to float in a giant pumpkin down the Missouri River. We've actually got a picture of Dwayne here. This is him. How did this start off? This actually started off with him first growing a pumpkin that is 864 pounds. So really, really big pumpkin. He hollowed this thing out. He put a cooler inside. You can see that he's sitting on this cooler. And then he floats 36 miles down the Missouri River. Now let me ask you, if someone in your home, someone in your family said, I got this idea. It's about growing this giant pumpkin. And I know we got the Salt River, and so maybe we can get, like, if one of your family members came up with that idea, would you side with them? Like, would you be like, let's do, or would you be like, that's crazy, that's ridiculous, that's dumb? Let's do it. Okay, McKinley may be growing that pumpkin in his backyard starting tomorrow. We don't know. We'll see how it goes. So one of the reasons why I like, first of all, isn't it nice that his name's Dwayne? Right, that's fitting, isn't it, that his name's Dwayne? Like, would Archibald, if this guy's name was Archibald, would he be floating a giant pumpkin down the river? Probably not. I love the name is, okay, anyway. So what I really like about this story is that when he celebrated his birthday and he did this Guinness Book World Record, his whole family was there. We got a picture of the family. His entire family was there. I think his daughter's actually the one that's taking the picture. And the reason why I love that his whole family was there is because, again, they're not just celebrating, hey, Dad, you're 60, but they're celebrating this weird victory that Dwayne has. There was one exception. In a later interview, he explained that his mom wasn't able to make it. And the reason why mom wasn't able to make it is she expressed to him, honey, I think you're going to drown, and my heart just can't take it. So her heart was for her son, and so, in order not to have a heart attack, she wasn't able to make it. But at the end of their little adventure, and at the end of his Guinness Book World Record, his daughter actually came up to him and said, Dad, I think you need to start growing a pumpkin that's big enough for both of us to float down the river next time. Now, what do you think Dwayne's reaction was? His reaction was, hey, I'm the pumpkin guy. What are you talking about? Like, that's my spotlight. That's my thing. You can come up with your own thing. No, he didn't say that. What did he say? He said, let's do it. Let's do it. And I think this is one of those wonderful pictures of what it looks like to yield the spotlight. Yield the spotlight a little bit when it comes to crazy ideas and just say, yeah, that's fantastic. How can I partner with you? And as you even think through, what would it sound like? What would it sound like to yield? What would it sound like to live out this meekness in your home? You know what meekness sounds like in your home? It sounds like, well done, not here's how it's done. It's not immediately going into the coaching mode. It's just saying, hey, let me celebrate this with you. This is great. You know what meekness sounds like in the home? It sounds like, wow, not how. How are we going to do that? That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Well, we've got to dot the I's and cross the T's. We've got to figure all this out. Like, how are we going to do that? No. It's just like, that's a little insane, but wow, that was really creative. How can I partner with you in this? That's what it looks like to live out this Christ-like meekness, and we see it in this family. There's another adjective. And in fact, let me back up before we get into the next one. Let's go back to the words of Jesus. Jesus says that there's a blessing for those who actually decide to live out this quality of meekness. You guys remember what it is? Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the meek for what? They will inherit the earth. They will inherit the earth. And you might even be thinking, well, how can meekness actually help you inherit the earth? I don't think it's at all the way we think of, obtaining this earth. When we think of obtaining this world and the things of this world, we think of probably power plays, and we think of, well, we got to have these political agendas, and we got to have these people on our side, and we've got to manipulate the situation here. And if we have enough money and we got enough influence and power, then maybe we can inherit this earth. I think what Jesus is describing is this meekness that is not necessarily allowing you to inherit the land, but actually inherit the hearts and the minds of people. Because what are you doing when you're for them, when you yield? People are naturally drawn to you. And what is this family doing? This family is a great picture of actually winning the hearts and affections of one another. I mean, what better place to start with this meekness, winning the hearts and minds of people than in our own home? All right, there's a third adjective that I want to look at, and it's the word humble. It's the word humility. And so let's just think about humility for a moment. We have that word that it's thrown around a lot, but what does it mean? The Apostle Paul talks about how it's actually this you first type of living. I'm going to lift you up rather than just me getting what I want. Let's read what he has to say. In Romans, he talks about this, specifically in Romans chapter 12, verse 10, he explains it. He says, be devoted to one another in love. And here it is, honor one another above yourselves. What does this humility look like that comes from meekness? Well, you're actually honoring other people above yourself. Why? Why would you honor other people above yourself? Is it because they deserve it? No, of course not. But every single time you decide to honor someone above yourself, what you're doing is you're actually celebrating the fact that God did this for you. You're celebrating the fact that God said, you know what, I'm going to honor you above myself by sending my son Jesus to carry the weight of your sin, and you're celebrating when you lift others up. So what does it look like to honor others above yourself in your own home? What are some of the rhythms that you have, or what are some of the rhythms that you could have in your home? Several years ago, I came home from work, and Dana started sharing with me how impressed she is with our boys. She was talking about how this week, wow, they have really honored me well, and they've been asking for ways that they can help, and they've been complimenting me, and it just feels really good to be honored. I was like, well, fantastic, right? They should be doing that. That's good. And then she looked at me and she said, you know where they get it, right? They get it from you. And I heard that, and I know you're thinking, you're bragging on yourself again, Pastor. All right. Here's the thing. I pass all kinds of stuff I wish I wasn't teaching and passing on to my kids. Some of you may have been out there playing with us even this past week, and guess what? You saw firsthand that I have passed on some hyper-competitiveness to my kids. I wish I hadn't, but I have. Some of you have heard, and you've had conversations with my kids. I've passed on my sarcasm to my kids, and it's like, oh, why have I done this? So there's plenty of things that I pass on. And so I'm just going to receive this compliment from my wife, but she went on to explain, she said, you know, Jonathan, you're so good about coming home and immediately complimenting how nice the house looks and how nice I look, and you're so good about actually stepping in and helping with dinner or other chores that need to be going on. And the boys have watched it, and they've seen it, and they realize that if that's how dad honors mom, maybe we should honor mom that way too. And I've got a teen who he's almost annoying at how much he wants to honor us, like to the point where it's like, hey, can I help you with that? Oh, can I help you with that? It's like, dude, it's already in my hands. It's going to require more effort, like to give you the, it's like, oh, Dad, no, thank you so much for driving. Thank you so much for cooking. Thank you so much for using the air freshener because you really like stunk it up in there. It's like, oh my goodness, like, I know, you want to honor me. It's fantastic. But they pick that up from mom too. I'll get these texts every once in a while, and the text will say, or a phone call from Dana, and she'll say, hey, can you tell me like 20, like before you get home, I need like a window of like 20 to 15 minutes. So just let me know. And it took me a while to figure out why she needed like 15 to 20 minutes. And usually what it is they're doing, mom and kids are doing something really awesome, but really, really messy. And they know that dad doesn't really care about coming home and having a warm cooked meal. It's like, whatever, I can take care of that myself. But they know that dad doesn't really care for clutter. And so what does mom do? She rallies the troops and she says, let's honor dad. Let's honor dad by, before he gets home, just making sure that the clutter is picked up. And that's what honoring looks like in our home. What does it look like in your homes? What does it look like to honor others above yourself? What could it look like? All right, it is Father's Day, and so I want to share one last challenge with our dads, and I want to do this by first watching a video. Let's watch.
Are you and your son pretty close?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah? And would you consider yourself a pretty involved parent?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So I'm just going to ask you some questions about your son.
Right.
And just answer them to the best of your ability.
I will
okay?
do, no
Okay,
problem.
Very good.
Yeah.
What is your son's birthday?
No, that's a good one. That's a really good one, because I don't know.
You really don't know his
No, I
birthday?
don't know his birthday.
Do you consider you guys pretty close?
Yeah,
What is your daughter's favorite subject in school?
social study.
Is that true?
No.
What grade is your daughter going into?
9th grade.
What's the name of your daughter's school?
Ash Creek Elementary School.
No.
River Creek.
No.
Something Creek.
No.
What color are your daughter's eyes?
Brown.
All right, let's look. That is incorrect.
They're blue. I have a brown-eyed daughter, though.
What is your daughter's birthday?
May 17th. Oh, no, it's the 14th, and I don't know what year.
Can you name your daughter's teacher?
Mrs. Jones.
Nope.
Mrs. Moore. Is not Moore?
Nope. That was my elementary school teacher.
Can you name their teachers?
Of course I cannot.
What are your daughter's birthdays?
Why do you do this to me?
What about her?
I give up.
Any guesses?
Oh yeah, yesterday!
Her birthday was yesterday. and you
Just
forgot
yesterday, yes.
it. Can you name the best friend of each of your daughters?
Mari Carmen Rojas, Jimena Lopez, Adamari Lopez, Cristina Cornejo,
Good. Can you give us the name of their doctor?
Fadi Torres,
Good. Can you give us the name of their dentist?
Games Dental Land.
What are your daughter's birthdays?
Yes, May 28, 2009, August 8, 2013, February 24, 2006, June 8, 2006.
So I watched that like 3 or 4 times and cracked up at that guy's face every single time. Some of you are wondering, what in the world is this last challenge to fathers? So here it is. Here's the challenge. You need to understand. Here's the challenge. Can you understand that moms are going to be better than you every single time, right? That's the, no, that may be true. That may be true, but that's actually not the challenge. Here's the challenge. Dads, you're not going to get things right 100% of the time. There may be times where you actually even forget your child's birthday. You may actually even forget their eye color. There's going to be times where you mess up, but the challenge is this. Can we lead the way in our homes? If we're going to be a Christ-centered home, if we're going to be a man of God who actually doesn't just sit on the fence and observe, hey, this is what Jesus did, but if you're really actually going to implement what Christ-like living looks like, can you lead the way when it comes to meekness? Can you lead the way when it comes to meekness? Meaning, yeah, you've got this amazing position of authority. You've got this amazing position of power. Typically, you're stronger, you're bigger, right? You've got this amazing position of being right because you're the parent. So the parent's always right. So what are you going to do? Are you going to use that strength to get what you want, or are you going to leverage it so that you can actually strengthen those around you who might be feeling a little weak? Will you lead the way when it comes to meekness in the sense that you don't have to have the spotlight all the time? You can actually let those around you shine. Will you choose, dads, and I would even extend this to moms, and I would extend this to kids, will you consistently live out this humble, lifting others up above yourself? Because what is the blessing? The blessing is that you begin to inherit the hearts and the minds of those around you. Let's pray. God, we're here on Father's Day really wanting to celebrate you more than anyone else, that you would use your strength, your power, your authority, your rightness. No one is righter than you. And you took that and you leveraged that for our benefit. In our sin, you sided with us, not against us. Father God, I pray that this would be a day that we celebrate you, and that this would lead into celebrating you every single day of the week and of the year and of our lives. We praise you and we thank you. In your Son's name, amen.